This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your go-to Iowa-based sports show, hosted by the one and only Eliot Clough.
Hey guys, time to get in on the action for the biggest moments in basketball with PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projections, place your entry, and win up to 100 times your money. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit of up to $100. Just download the PrizePicks app and use the code GET100. That's code GET100 on PrizePicks for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
What's up, Cedar Valley, and hello to the Hawkeye State. This is Cornstalks and Sports Talk, your Iowa-based sports show here on AM 950 KOEL. My name is Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter. I'm a UNI insider for Townsquare Media. We've got an awesome show ahead. We're going to be joined by Nick Osen of 24/7 Sports and Cyclone Alert once again. He and I will talk Big 12 Media Days and what he heard from Coach Campbell as well as the players over the last couple days in Dallas. Then the new voice of the Panthers, J.W. Cox. He's joining the show to tell us why he wanted to be a part of the UNI family, talk a little bit about his background, and some more. You do not want to miss that one. JW's a great guy. I'm really excited to work with him in the future. For now, I like to use this first segment. This is really where I can be creative on my own. I really do enjoy recording this first segment by myself. Not that talking with guys like Nick and JW is just awful. It's the worst part. But I love having this first segment to myself, to throw in a little bit of my own creativity and to talk a little bit about some things that aren't necessarily super Iowa focused. Now, I know Iowa doesn't really have any professional teams. Of course, they got the Iowa Cubs, they've got the Iowa Wild and the Iowa Wolves, but no top-tier teams in the NFL and the MLB, in the NBA, rather. But there are fans of all of these levels of sport here in Iowa. I know there are Packers, Vikings. I'm a Chargers fan, believe it or not. When you're in Iowa, you can pick whatever. Chiefs fans. I know of Steelers fans in Iowa. And when it comes to the NBA, I used to cover the Pelicans, so that's my team. And then, of course, in Iowa, it's Bulls, it's Timberwolves, it's Milwaukee Bucks fans. And so I want to take the time to go a little bit out of the box today, out of the Cornstalks and Sports Talk box today, and talk a little bit more about what's going on nationally in the NBA. And it's with a name that you'll all recognize, Kevin Durant. And now it's not just Kevin Durant that's in the spotlight nationally right now. If you're really an NBA fan and you've been following along, Donovan Mitchell is there as well. Kyrie Irving finds himself in the spotlight pretty frequently. And of course, Rudy Gobert actually just got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves for a bevy of picks and some role players. And so all of these guys have more recently been in the spotlight nationally, like I mentioned. It's lesser so Mitchell and Gobert, at least for me. That's what I'm seeing on the Twitter timeline and from more of these national outlets. So we won't talk about them so much, but what I do know about Mitchell is that he had beef with Gobert for so long. I think he's ready to be done in Utah, and from what I've seen, what I've heard, he's probably going to end up in New York. I don't know. These things go sideways so quickly. We have no idea where guys goes. I mean, DeAndre Ayton signed a 4-year, $133 million contract with the Pacers yesterday, and then the Phoenix Suns matched it. So he was a Pacer for all of 4 hours, and now he's back with the Suns. So back to the topic at hand, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, but more specifically, Kevin Durant. In regards to KD, this guy is obviously a phenomenal talent. 2-time NBA Finals MVP, 2-time NBA champion, both of those, of course, being when he was with the Golden State Warriors. led the league in scoring a variety of times. I'm pretty sure at least once, I know. He won NBA MVP when he was with the Thunder. He, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook were a trio to be feared. At least that's what we thought. And then James Harden headed to Houston. KD left for the Warriors, and Russell Westbrook stayed in Oklahoma City. We all know how that turned out. All three won NBA MVPs, but not with the same team. Anyway, KD, clear Hall of Famer, one of the greatest basketball players I have ever seen, probably the best scorer in the league. And he has this crazy ability to rise up over defenders and knock down shots from anywhere all over the floor. But at the same time, he has a little bit of baggage. He's a little sensitive, feels the need to respond to tweets and to videos from media members. And who knows, maybe if he responds to this, Cornstalks and Sports Talk will blow up nationally. I'm here for it. We won't bank on it. He's got the burner accounts on Twitter. For those of you who don't know, it's accounts where you remain anonymous. He's always convinced that the media is against him. And now he wants to be traded from a team that he picked, from a duo that he and Kyrie formed, from a team that was so willing to shake things up to add him. They traded a large part, I'm pretty sure all of their young core, from a team that was rising in the East. D'Angelo Russell, Jarrett Allen, a few other guys on that roster. They fired their head coach, Kenny Atkinson, and they brought in a hand-picked head coach that Kevin Durant wanted in Steve Nash, a guy who never had a head coaching position before, never coached in the NBA. He's an advisor for the Warriors, so fine. I'll give him that. He's one of the greatest point guards, maybe even basketball players of all time, probably the greatest Canadian basketball player of all time. And KD got all of that, everything he wanted. Off an Achilles tear, man. Tore his Achilles, got a huge contract, got to pick anything and everything he wanted in Brooklyn, and now he wants out after signing an extension, need I mind you. After signing a 4-year extension that he starts this season where he's going to make almost $43 million, which escalates to $53 million in 2025, 2026. And this is, again, all after an Achilles tear. And he's been phenomenal post-Achilles tear. But at the same time, we saw in the playoffs this year that he can't do it all by himself. No, he cannot. The only time we've seen Kevin Durant really do it is when he had Steph Curry on his team, when he had Klay Thompson and Draymond Green on his team, and we had Russell Westbrook on his team, and Serge Ibaka and James Harden and a bunch of other veterans that pushed them to being successful in the playoffs, and still they only made it to the finals one time. So asking for this trade post-Achilles tear, post-contract extension, and post-getting everything you want is insanity to me. You know, I think the player empowerment movement, has largely been good for basketball. I think the teams really dictated too much of how things went, but this player empowerment is like everything else. You know, respecting the military and the U.S. to the point that you think Colin Kaepernick is just evil, and, you know, the entirety of the wokeness movement saying that everything is racist, and to the basic level of staying outside too long and you get burnt and you may get skin cancer. That's what this player empowerment has come to, and we've seen it over and over again now. The AD situation, Anthony Davis wanting to leave New Orleans. Kyrie Irving is a nutbag. This guy just gets to, oh yeah, I don't want to get the vaccine, so I'm not going to play for 6 months. That's okay. See you later. What? Jimmy Butler throwing a fit at Minnesota Timberwolves practice. You effing need me. James Harden shows up fat, like obese, to Houston training camp and preseason games. Chris Paul forced his way out of New Orleans and LA. Kawhi Leonard didn't want to play in San Antonio anymore with the greatest coach, arguably the greatest coach of all time. So he went to the Raptors, and sure, he won a championship, fine. And sure, AD won a championship in the bubble. Like, do we really count that? And so now, to me, this is a time where player empowerment, again, has gone too far. Kevin Durant has 4 years, 4 years left on his contract, and he says that he just signed 11 months ago. 11 months ago. What so drastically changed in the last 11 months where you want to take back the next 4 years of your life and play them somewhere else? You're telling me things so drastically changed over 11 months that you no longer want to fulfill the contract that you signed. And honestly, who in their right mind right now wants Kevin Durant on their basketball team other than Brooklyn? I mean, like when you sit down and think about it, in exchange for everything that you'd have to give up for Kevin Durant. How's that? Because on its face, that statement was a little wild from me. Because if you're Sacramento, you take Kevin Durant, right? I mean, like, any team in the NBA, if Brooklyn calls and says, hey, we want to trade you Kevin Durant, you take that phone call 1,000 times out of 1,000. Like, this is a top 5 player in the league, one of the greatest scorers of all time. I'm a huge fan of watching Kevin Durant play basketball. I don't care if you're the Thunder. I don't care if you're the Lakers. I don't care if you're the Warriors who just won a championship, the 4th of the Steph Curry era. You take that call every time. But this guy, Kevin Durant, got everything he wanted, got to handpick everything he wanted, got to sign millions and millions of dollars worth of contract years, extensions. After tearing his Achilles, the furthest he's gone is the second round of the playoffs, and now he wants a trade. This is insanity to me. By the way, you're listening to Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. But here's the thing that really drives it home for me, especially as a guy who used to cover the NBA, is Kevin Durant is one of these guys in a league full of egos like the NBA that comes in, does not assimilate to the team, and then considers himself, he has that aura of just being better than you. And like, I don't care if, I genuinely don't care if you are a multi-time NBA champion, you've been lauded your whole life. Just be kind to people and don't think you're better than them. That's a quick turnoff for me as a person. But that is what you get with Kevin Durant, along with being one of the best players in the NBA. A locker room killer, a guy that doesn't assimilate to the culture anywhere. He wasn't happy in Golden State. He felt the need to start stuff in Golden State when you're playing along with one of the other best players in the world, and you're just automatically going to win a championship. Virtually automatically going to win a championship. And now, in order for a team to acquire you, at least to Brooklyn standards, they'd have to give up Devin Booker to go get Kevin Durant. At least the Suns would. And that's been the main team, or one of the main teams that have been talked about when it comes to acquiring Kevin Durant. And if you're the Phoenix Suns, I don't want to do that. We were just the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. Devin Booker has fully bought in. He wants to be here. And there's no guarantee that you will want to be here next year, Kevin Durant. And there's a possibility you ruin our team's chemistry and the way we actually enjoy being around each other in that year's time frame, Kevin Durant. And not only that, he wants to play with Devin Booker. That's not going to happen, KD. They're going to want Devin Booker in exchange for you. I mean, I'd love to do radio with Colin Cowherd or Dan Patrick, but that's not happening anytime soon. And then he wants to play for the Heat, who were the number 1 seed in the East last year. There's no way in blue hell the Heat could afford that. They can't trade Bam Adebayo to KD or to Brooklyn in exchange for KD due to some technical contract stuff I don't know enough about. I just know that to be a fact. Kevin Durant, there is no way in blue hell I want that guy on my team. There's just not. Even if you're the Pelicans, who haven't been a consistent playoff team ever. Reportedly, according to Scoop B, who is not a great source when it comes to this stuff. If you know anything about NBA trade stuff and Twitter, Scoop B likes to tweet stuff out all the time. It's almost never legit. Brandon Ingram, Larry Nance, and multiple picks supposedly are what the Brooklyn Nets wanted in exchange for Kevin Durant, and the Pelicans said no, and I don't blame them. Don't give up Brandon Ingram, who you just signed to a max contract, who clearly wants to be in New Orleans, to bring in Kevin Durant to play alongside Zion Williamson, who's shown that he can't stay on an NBA floor, and bring in a guy who just tore his Achilles a few years ago. No. You really just figured out all this locker room stuff with Willie Green? Coming in and picking up the pieces of the Stan Van Gundy era, and you're going to go out and bring in Kevin Durant? I don't think so. KD, I love watching him play basketball. This is delusion. I'm not touching Kevin Durant with a 10-foot pole, nor his 7-foot wingspan. Okay, I'm done. Let's get on to this next segment. Nick Osen from 24/7 Sports. He covers the Cyclones. He's going to be joining us talking about Big 12 Media Days in just a few. Stick around for this next segment here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com. Second segment of Cornstalks and Sports Talk coming at you right now on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com with me, UNI Insider for Townsquare Media, Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter. Iowa State basketball has been all we've talked about the last few months, but football season is quickly approaching, and we've got friend of the show, Iowa State beat writer for 24/7 Sports, Nick Osen, on this morning, once again, coming off his first Big 12 Media Days in Dallas. Nick, what does it feel like to be a Big J journalist?
Man, it's always great to be on, and, it felt really good to be covering an event like that. I had done several Big Ten Media Days while I was in college, but obviously this is kind of the first one that I've done full-time. As we kind of talked about off the show, it's been a lot of traveling this week, but it was truly an awesome experience. I'm blessed to be able to do that and kind of have that time around not only, the coaches and the staff, but also some of the players and meeting journalists from all over the country and just kind of being able to learn and connect in a conference that I'm still a little bit new to as well.
This guy is traveling, yes, like crazy right now. So for those of you who are Iowa State fans tuning in, just let it be known that this man is here for you and here for us on Cornstalks and Sports Talk. We appreciate Nick hopping on with all the craziness. Now, since you've been to Big Ten Conference Media Days and Big 12 Media Days, is there a difference between the two at all? Like, do you notice anything?
Yeah, so I would say I think the Big Ten, I got the sense that maybe at least when I did it, there was a little more of maybe a highly focused and intense type of vibe. I felt like there were kind of, aspects of that this week with the Big 12 just because of so much talk of conference realignment and the future of the Big 12 and obviously Pac-12, Big 10, SEC type talk. So there was a little intensity there, but otherwise it was just kind of a very smooth, somewhat slow-moving process in the couple days that featured really all the Big 12 teams. But, I learned some things that I didn't necessarily expect, including getting a chance to be around the commissioner and seeing, how confident he is in the future of the Big 12 Conference, which I feel like a lot of fans, certainly of Iowa State, and, kind of when I've read their reactions, I think they gained a lot of confidence and positivity from the new commissioner, Brett Yormark. So that was pretty cool to see. And also some of the rules committee. We got to hear and, listen to him break down some of the new rules. For example, there's some changes with defensive holding, leading to automatic first downs no matter how far the distance is and things like that, which obviously we were at the Big 12, so it was focused there. But these will be new rules implemented in the game of college football. So it's important to kind of get ahead of those things, especially like me when you're talking about or writing about these teams and, you really want to get prepared for the season. In a season which I'm sure we'll hit on pretty shortly, there are varied expectations for the Cyclones team. So I'm really excited to kind of learn and experience what that's going to be like after a season that was considered somewhat of a disappointment from Iowa State.
Let's get right into it. That was a question I had coming up, but like you said, expectations are kind of all over the place for the Cyclones going into this year. Last season, they started the year number 7 team in the country, and then UNI almost beat them on their home field. Well, but we don't have to talk about that today. Do you think being a little bit more underrated this year favors the Cyclones? What do you think of the expectations, being that they're so varied? Is there a middle ground that you think the Cyclones will fall into? Where are you at right now with going into the season and those expectations?
Yeah, my friend, so I'm going to stay consistent. I've said it really since I started being around this team and some of the players and getting to see some of their practices. I think that it is an absolute positive for Iowa State to have not only varied expectations, but potentially to be considered somewhat under the radar. I mean, I know I've said on this show, at least once when I touched on the future of the team, I'm high on Hunter Deckers, the quarterback. I think that there's a lot of talent on that offense. If he lives up to what I think at quarterback, we've got an all-Big 12 future NFL wideout in Xavier Hutchinson, an all-Big 12 offensive lineman in Trevor Downing, and then a lot of young pieces that, I especially learned this week. The staff and the fellow teammates are very high on some of those pieces, including freshmen and sophomores in the backfield, as well as at wideout. And one of my biggest takeaways that I really felt somewhat, good and validated about being around Coach Matt Campbell and some of the players in Dallas is that I thought the best unit in spring ball was the secondary, and it turns out Campbell feels like this is the best secondary that he has had and been around at his time at Iowa State. He feels it's incredibly deep. That's something Hutchinson said too. So you look at that like if the quarterback steps up, you've got a strong back line on defense, and maybe the best pass rusher in the country in Will McDonald. Those are some legitimate winning pieces there where you figure winning anywhere between 7 to 8 games in the regular season is absolutely doable in a loaded Big 12 conference this year.
And what's funny about that, and I'm sure a lot of people had some alarm bells going off in their head, is that the defensive backfield being so loaded, this is a year after Isheem Young transfers to Ole Miss.
Exactly. He was one of the transfers, and then they lost a couple safety pieces this spring as well to the transfer portal, including Craig McDonald, who would at least have been in the twos. Many thought he might be a starter. There was a lot of buzz off of another player, Malik Verdone, coming out of this spring. So that was kind of a question mark. But, yeah, including some veterans like Anthony Johnson, Darian Porter, Tavon Kyle's another name. But I am very high on, I'll say it, Miles Purchase at the cornerback position. He's someone that showed flashes late in the year, and he's got a chance to be a truly stud cornerback, potentially a CB1 throughout his time at Iowa State. Got kind of the size and, really technique, especially, to be a future pro potentially at the next level.
Wow, that's some high praise from 24/7 Sports Cyclone Insider Nick Osen joining us here on 90. Wrong station, Eliot. AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com, Cornstalks and Sports Talk. So, did you take anything else away from media days? Anything else particular stand out to you from maybe something Coach Campbell said or any of the players? Maybe not necessarily specific to the defensive backs, but anything that you've left Big 12 media days maybe thinking, hey, I didn't know that before.
Well, it was kind of, maybe just a sense of overall validation, but a lot of the media may not have known some of these coming in. Like when I left spring ball, I felt like that's a good football team and they're going to surprise some people. And based on how just about every player talked, including Downing and Hutchinson, like I mentioned, they feel that their respective position groups, Downing said, got the potential to be the best offensive line that he's been a part of. Now, I will say that's an area Iowa State hasn't been great the last few seasons. You've probably seen that before I even came to the great state of Iowa, so that's something I have heard. And then Hutchinson, he listed, I want to say 5 or 6 guys that could potentially be in kind of the running for the 1s or 2s at wide receiver, and that just speaks to the depth of this year's team. It might not have all of the big names like Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, Mike Rose, any guys like that, and Uwazurike, but I think it's deep. I think this staff relishes the opportunity to kind of prove some people wrong, or maybe just improve on expectations because they're so focused on just how they feel about the team. But there is a sense I feel like this team is looked at under the radar a little bit. And I think the Cyclones have the propensity to surprise some people this season.
Now, you've already referenced him a couple times, and it's new starting quarterback Hunter Dekkers, a 4-star from Hayward in Iowa. I don't follow the Cyclones like you do, obviously. I didn't see the snaps that he's taken in the last few years because he has had to be thrown in there a few times. What should Cyclone fans expect from this kid? Because, the Cyclones don't always get, the J.J. Cole commitments and these high-level quarterbacks coming in. Brock Purdy, obviously, sort of an anomaly that can step in and play right away in his Cyclone career. What should the expectations be for Hunter Dekkers? Is there a confidence from you when it comes to this new quarterback?
There is. Now, granted, I didn't see quite as much game action, obviously, in the last couple of years as, I wasn't really in the area, and Purdy is essentially an Iowa State legend at the quarterback position. But I feel like Dekkers has a lot of those physical traits, right? He's kind of cut his body this year, but he's still got strength. He can move a little better, or at least design runs better than Brock Purdy, I would say. He certainly has the deep ball strength, and he's really kind of garnered the, I'd say, leadership qualities and trust of his teammates. So, I haven't been shy about it. I think he's got the chance to be a really, really good college quarterback. He'll be a lefty, which is, kind of a change in the offense there. And I think the guys are incredibly excited about him. You could kind of see it when Xavier Hutchinson was talking about him, that it's just going to add another dimension to this offense, which is why, sure, I mentioned the DBs, but it all comes back to the quarterback, and I think that is why Iowa State should be at least competitive in just about every game. And I've picked them to have a winning record and continue their bowl streak, so that's something I expect there as well, Eliot.
Now, Xavier Hutchinson, that's a big name that I am very, very excited to see this fall. 83 catches. I believe that was an Iowa State single-season record last season. I put together an article. I'm sure you've seen the East-West Shrine Bowl 1000 that they released. Xavier Hutchinson on that list. That kid is legit. You could check out that article on KOEL.com, by the way. I could definitely see him being one of the best wide receivers in the country. Like, I don't think that is a crazy statement at all. Are you there too?
Oh, yeah. I actually would say I think he already is. He's, potentially the top guy in the Big 12, certainly one of them. I think he's got pretty good size, but just what I like so much about Hutchinson is the ability to run just about every route.
Yep.
And I think when he gets the chance in space, he's not necessarily like teammate Jalen Knoll, but I do think that he can make plays deep, and I think that deep ball with Hunter Dekkers is going to be something to watch this season and something that he is very ready to experience come fall.
Hopefully no ridiculous penalties when he scores all those touchdowns like we saw last fall in Ames. Now, the last question I have for you, Nick, coming off Big 12 Media Days, he's from 24/7 Sports, Nick Osen, beat writer for them covering Iowa State. Huge loss in Breece Hall, who you've mentioned again a few times. He's headed to the NFL, playing for the New York Jets. How about replacing him? Because that is arguably the best running back in Iowa State history.
Yeah, I do like how you said arguably, because they have had a lot of good ones. He was arguably the best in the entire country in the last year or two, which is, saying a lot. But I think Jirel Brock, though I don't expect him to have the star power of a Breece Hall, I think he's going to be a good college running back, and I think that's another room that is deep. Freshman Cartavius Norton has kind of gotten some buzz from spring ball as well. I really like what Eli Sanders can do as a receiver out of the backfield. So, they might not quite have the big-time names that, say, the running backs or tight ends have had the last couple of years, but I think it's going to be a good group, and, I'm going to stick with it on record that I think the offense will be pretty solid for Iowa State this season.
Nick Osen from 24/7 Sports. He covers the Iowa State Cyclones basketball and football, and he is confident. Go give him a follow on Twitter. It's @TheRealNickOsen there. He does great work. You can follow along. And he is a busy man, so we're going to let him go. Nick, we always appreciate you taking some time.
I love this show, my dude. That's why I'll always make the time for you. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
And we're back here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950, KOEL, and KOEL.com with me, Eliot Clough, @EliotClough on Twitter. So after 29 years, the voice of the Panthers, Gary Rima, decided it was time to hang up the mic or hand off the mic to new play-by-play voice, J.W. Cox. We've had Gary on now, and now we've got J.W. joining us. Very, very appreciative of you taking some time this morning, JW, and we're excited to learn a little bit about you as you're learning about the Cedar Valley and UNI as well.
I appreciate you having me on, Eliot. It's been good to have people reach out, and this is the best way to learn some of those things. Talk to people like you who have been around and been through it as a UNI grad yourself, and yeah, that's what I've told people. I got to do a lot more listening than talking, really, to certainly get started. Once I go on air, right? I mean, that's what I'm supposed to do, but until then, to get ready, I got to do a lot more listening.
It's a little foreign to people like us who are in broadcasting.
That's right.
So tell us, what about UNI? What about Cedar Falls made you want to be the next voice of the Panthers?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, this is the type of job that I've basically been working towards as I decided to do this as a career. I got into the business of broadcasting how a lot of people do, I think, and that's starting with the world of baseball. And collegiate summer league baseball was really my first professional experience broadcasting. And I thought that was the way I wanted to go, really, just listen to some of the great baseball broadcasters I got to growing up in California, and I thought that was going to be the case. When I got the chance to call St. Cloud State football and basketball here in Minnesota starting in 2011, that kind of all shifted to knowing that the collegiate game and telling the stories of collegiate student athletes and those teams and the different dynamic there, that really became my passion. And so I kind of started zeroing in on what the path becomes to get to a position just like this, to be the voice of those types of programs at a major university. And then when UNI pops up these years later, there's so many things that go into it. I had heard of UNI, like a lot of people had, thanks to the basketball team certainly putting them on the map nationally with a lot of their big wins. I well remember where I was exactly when they beat Kansas and when that happened, never thinking that years later this would be my opportunity. And in the football program with what Coach Farley has done to put them right where they are every single year, competing in FCS and among one of the top programs there, to be so competitive and have a shot at being the best every single season. It makes this job from a play-by-play standpoint so attractive, slam dunk attractive for a broadcaster. And then as a guy with a family too, it's the same Midwest feel in a lot of ways that you can get where I've been so far in St. Cloud and in Minnesota. It's close to where my extended family is for my wife, as far as not being that far from Minnesota. And just as we talked about a little bit before we got started, the vibe we've gotten already from the Cedar Valley and the time that we've been there and the time we've gotten to spend as a family in Cedar Falls has just been outstanding for what we want to raise a family. So I'm extremely fortunate that all of these things have come together to make this the opportunity that I got to make this jump to a D1 program and a community that just loves their school and loves their Panthers and get to be the voice of those programs.
No baseball, unfortunately, at UNI, but
that's true. It's funny. As I've gone through my career, I've had multiple people who I've reached out for advice, guidance, critiques, things like that, and they've all come back with similar comments about how, you're good at baseball, you can do it, it's good, but your voice tends to be more, and your style and your enthusiasm tends to be more towards maybe being the voice of a program. So it's worked out. I remember the first time I heard that, and I thought, well, I don't know, that doesn't necessarily jive with what I want to do, but it became what the passion was for me, and I certainly see that that's been true, and I hope to show that to all the folks in the Cedar Valley.
Now, when I was writing the article about you being the next voice of the Panthers, I definitely found you on LinkedIn and looked at all your experience. So I'm coming at that with a little bit of knowledge from there.
Yeah.
You've done a little bit of TV, you've done radio. When I've asked Gary specifically about the choice to do either TV or radio, one thing that he said about preference to radio was that he gets to paint the picture for people who are listening. Is that a part of the pull for you to do radio play-by-play?
100%, Eliot. I mean, there's nothing like radio. I enjoy the things I've done on TV. You get to do different things as far as features and more things you can bring to the audience necessarily with the video and that component and breaking things down like that. But I look at it this way. The last 8 years that I've been with the St. Paul Saints, we've done a TV radio simulcast for all of the games. And it's actually difficult for me because I feel like if you're trying to broadcast on TV, then you're leaving out the radio audience. And to me, that's always been a pull. It's too easy to potentially leave them out because you do have the picture and you tend to talk about a replay and all this kind of stuff that comes with TV, which is good because you don't want to dumb it down for the TV audience who's also watching. So it's a weird in between, but I've always leaned towards the radio side of that. I would rather be able to have that freedom, like Gary would mention, to paint that picture, to take the broadcast wherever the game goes, and not kind of even be beholden to the pictures that the cameras can get. Right, I can do something that's way off field if it's contributing to the atmosphere, or things like that. And I think that's especially important in the collegiate game when you have such great fan bases, you have such great atmospheres, great backdrops, unique backdrops for all these games and all these teams that a lot of the UNI fans are going to be familiar with when you're in conference play and they've been to these places. We'll get to see a new one in Air Force coming up to start the season. But I think he's obviously right. He's one of the best to ever do this, and he knows what he's talking about. When you can paint that picture, it gives you a lot of freedom. It gives you a lot of joy, and I think it makes it a more unique broadcast in what you can do and bring to the listener.
And you mentioned that first game coming up against Air Force in September. That is, like you said, it's the first matchup ever that UNI has had against Air Force. What have you been doing to prepare? Can you tell us about what that process has been like?
Well, it's funny. It's a little daunting, right? I mean, if you get to cover, as I have, one team year in, year out, even with the St. Paul Saints, there's significant turnover in minor league baseball year to year. You never know who's going to be where. But with the collegiate sports at St. Cloud, you get into a rhythm, right? These guys come in, these people come in as freshmen, and you watch them grow, and you know when they're going to hit and be a potential impact player, and you can kind of have that coming in, for all intents and purposes, pretty blank to what the nuts and bolts of each of these teams are. It's a daunting process, but I start by going back and looking at how last season finished and kind of use that as a jumping off point. The awards, which go to, obviously some guys that have moved on now into the NFL and they're chasing those dreams. On the basketball side, we're seeing what's happening in the summer league with a lot of excitement there for AJ Green and all of that. So it's fun to look back at that, but then that also gives me a template for, okay, who can be the potential players that are going to be the impact players now in both football and basketball moving forward, knowing what is gone and knowing what was still there and who had big years last year. So it's fun to be able to get those first looks. And obviously there's impact guys. You start with football, where I focus the most because we've got a little bit more time until basketball hits. But I mean, you can focus on impact guys. And on the defensive side, a guy like Benny Sapp is a great place to start, right? I mean, if this defense is going to be a lockdown, shutout, Mark Farley defense that everybody has come to know over the years, he's going to be a big part of it. And so for me, starting with some kind of those touchstone guys and being able to get a good handle on who those guys will be, that's a good place to start. And then once we get closer to that first game, they go through camp, things start to crystallize a little bit. And that's when you get down to the real nitty gritty of making sure you've got all the I's dotted and T's crossed with everything you need to know.
If you were to name drop any player on the UNI football roster, you got the right one, sir. That was good. So what would you say you've learned about Panther football so far? Anything stick out? You mentioned Benny Sapp, but any other players, any other moments from last season that you've seen or anything about Coach Farley? Drew Tate's joining the staff, which is awesome for football fans across the state of Iowa. Any other things that have stuck out to you about the football team going into 2022?
I've heard the most probably about the Drew Tate edition, right? From people that I know in the state of Iowa. So you're right there that has definitely created some buzz, and that'll be fun and exciting to see what he adds and what he brings. Obviously a known commodity on the field too. But I think it starts for me, Eliot, with Coach Farley, because that's another thing about this job, both with football and basketball. The experience and the success that both of those coaches have brought and built to their programs, it's easy to look and see kind of what their hallmarks are. And Coach Farley builds good defenses, right? I mean, he's had some good offensive players over the years, and certainly you got to score points in the Missouri Valley Football Conference to win games against a lot of these teams. And so it's not an also-ran, but he's going to build those teams around defense. So it's exciting for me to see how that has been a dominant force and kind of a calling card for the Panthers over the years. And that's another reason you kind of start with those guys and those names on that side of the football, because you know that's kind of what Coach is building towards, and he wants that to be a little bit of the identity every single year.
Talking with J.W. Cox. He's the new voice of the Panthers here on Cornstalks and Sports Talk on AM 950 KOEL and KOEL.com. He's not the voice of the Panthers on KOEL, but he is the new voice of the Panthers joining us today on this Saturday morning. You've been all over too. I mean, like, it's not just you weren't just in St. Paul. You've been on both coasts, if I remember right. At least Arizona. I don't know if you'd count that as a coast, but over on the western part of the states, and more recently in St. Cloud. What have you taken from these experiences? How has this all built you into the broadcaster that you are now?
I think the easiest answer to that is the relationships that I've built at all those stops. I think that's what, both on the air and the product that you can bring, and then just professionally for me, how you get a good product out there is how you treat people, how you communicate with people. I talked about it again before we got started, or right when we got started. It's about the relationships with me and the coaches and the players and the coaching staffs and the people in athletics. That's what's going to make me successful and give me a good broadcast, because I need them more than they need me, right? So I want to build those relationships.
Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston are springing up cash. Just sell us your gently used warm weather styles like tees, shorts, sandals, and more. We're paying cash on the spot for gently used spring styles for guys and girls. Support sustainable fashion. This spring, do your thing and recycle the spring-inspired clothes, shoes, and accessories that are just hanging in your closet for cash on the spot. Let your spring clothes bloom into cash at Plato's Closet. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.